My brother's fiance looked me dead in the eye at the rehearsal and said, "You don't fit the vibe, don't come tomorrow. No whisper, no shame, just a clean public cut." My brother didn't defend me. My parents stared at their shoes. I walked out of their dream wedding carrying the sting of every whispered laugh behind me. That night, I didn't beg or argue. I drove home, tore off the dress that still smelled of their flowers, and made one phone call that changed everything. Their big day never even began. Before I tell you the rest, tell me, where are you listening from? So I know I'm not alone. And when you've heard my story, tell me, what would you have done in my place? I grew up in a house where silence spoke louder than any apology. My mother, Sylvia, believed that peace was more important than truth, and my father, Richard, believed that silence was peace. That left me the problem solver, the steady one, to hold everything together. When something broke, I fixed it. When Aaron failed, I covered for him. It was never a question. It was my role. Aaron was the golden child, the one with the easy grin and the bad timing that everyone forgave. He could forget birthdays, crash cars, lose jobs, and somehow it was always just a phase. I was the planner, the spreadsheet in human form, the person who kept the lights on. My mother used to say it like a compliment, "Elena doesn't need anything." It took me 31 years to realize she meant Elena doesn't matter if she's not useful. When Aaron met Madeline, my family treated it like he'd won the lottery. She was polished, photogenic, the kind of woman who spoke in curated sentences and smiled only when someone was watching. From day one, she looked at me like I was an inconvenient footnote in her perfect story. Still, I told myself to be gracious. Maybe she'd warm up. Maybe this was my chance to finally be part of something instead of just paying for it. So when they got engaged, I offered to handle the wedding logistics as my gift. Not just the bills, though, yes, those too, but the planning itself. I booked the venue, met with florists, built timelines, managed invoices. It was what I did best. Numbers made sense. People didn't. Each payment came from my account, each contract under my name, each email signed E. Carter, because Madeline wanted things to look professional. I didn't question it. I wanted it to go smoothly for Aaron's sake. For months I told myself their small dismissals didn't matter. The way Madeline corrected me in front of vendors, the way my mother said, "Don't make this about you," whenever I tried to share an idea. I smiled through it all, reminding myself that family means compromise. Then came the rehearsal dinner. The Willow Estate glowed under thousands of string lights I'd approved, reflected perfectly on the lake I'd chosen. Guests laughed, champagne glasses clinked, and Madeline stood in the center of it all like a magazine cover come to life. I stood at the edge, checking vendor notes, invisible but useful, until she turned and cut me out with a single line. That moment didn't come from nowhere. It came from years of being the dependable background character in other people's stories. But that night, watching the lights shimmer over the lake, I made myself a quiet promise I'd never pay for my own erasure again. And if it meant burning down the picture-perfect world I'd built for them, so be it. The next morning, I woke up to a string of polite chaos in my inbox, messages from vendors confirming final details, timelines, menu adjustments, delivery times. Every subject line began with "Congratulations to the happy couple." It should have felt like satisfaction. Instead, it felt like salt in a wound I hadn't noticed was still bleeding. I went through the motions, confirming schedules, double-checking payments, forwarding contracts. My name sat at the bottom of every email like a ghost no one wanted to see. I told myself I was just finishing what I started. But when I called the venue to verify the head count, the coordinator hesitated. "Oh, Madeline already reached out," she said, her voice cautious. She wanted to update the main contact information for the event. Something in my chest went cold. "She what?" she said. "She's taking over and to remove you from all vendor communications." For a second, I couldn't even form words. My own name was being erased from something I built like whiteout over a contract. "Leave everything as is," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "If she calls again, tell her the account holder will be in touch." I hung up and just sat there listening to the hum of my office. The same room where I'd spent months crafting their perfect day spreadsheets, receipt schedules taped to the wall. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I took a sip anyway. Bitter. That was the taste of it all. I drove to my parents' house that afternoon hoping for some anchor, some sanity check. My mother barely looked up from her coffee when I told her what had happened. "Madeline's under a lot of stress," she said, waving her hand like she was brushing off dust. "You know how brides are. Can't you just let it go?" "Let it go," I said. "She uninvited me from a wedding I paid for." My father looked over the top of his newspaper. "You've always been independent, Elena. Let Aaron have his moment." There it was again, the script I'd heard my whole life. Aaron needs things. I can handle things. My role was to absorb the damage so he could stay golden. I drove home in silence, the kind that hums in your ears. On the passenger seat, my phone buzzed a text from Aaron. "Mads told me what happened. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." That was the moment it all clicked. This wasn't about a misunderstanding. It was coordination, a quiet, calculated removal. I pulled into my driveway and just sat there, watching the rain streak down the windshield. Every drop hit like punctuation on a sentence I didn't want to read. They wanted me gone, but they still wanted my money. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, tired, humiliated, furious. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like fixing anything. I felt like watching it all fall apart. That night, I spread every wedding document across my dining table, the same table that had hosted Thanksgiving dinners and quiet mornings of bookkeeping. Now it looked like a war map. Each folder had a color tab, each contract a clause I knew by heart. I wasn't thinking about revenge yet. I was thinking about clarity, about how many times I'd let people cross my boundaries because it was easier, about how being the capable one had turned into a trap I'd built myself. As I sat there, the doorbell rang. Miles Donovan, my business partner, and the only person who'd seen this storm brewing, stepped inside still holding his takeaway coffee. "You look like someone auditing her own family," he said softly. "Funny," I replied. "That's exactly what this is." He skimmed through the folders, eyebrows lifting. "These are all under your name, every single one," I said. "Venue, florist, catering, photographer, even the insurance." "Then you still hold the cards," he said. "They just forgot you're the dealer." I didn't smile, but something shifted inside me. Miles stayed until midnight, walking me through every cancellation clause, every refund policy, every legal shield I'd quietly built without realizing how much protection it offered me. I wasn't the outsider. I was the infrastructure. When he left, I sat in the silence of my apartment, surrounded by proof that everything they celebrated depended on me. My phone buzzed with missed calls from Aaron, then from Madeline, then from my mother. I didn't pick up. Instead, I saved their messages, each one a record of how easily they expected me to fold. At 6:00 a.m., I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and began making calls. Not emotional ones, not angry ones, business ones. Calm, precise, professional. "This is Elena Carter, primary account holder for the Carter Grant event. I'm formally terminating our agreement effective immediately." Some vendors hesitated. Some didn't. Most were sympathetic once they realized who was actually footing the bill. By 9:00 a.m., the dominoes were falling. The Willow estate was off the schedule. The florist canceled delivery. The caterer rebooked another event. By noon, the wedding no longer existed, at least not in any way that could be salvaged. I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion mixing with something else I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Not triumph, not spite, just freedom from a role that had never fit. My phone lit up again, Aaron's name flashing on the screen. I didn't answer. The calls would keep coming. The panic would grow, and for once I wasn't going to stop it. The storm hit faster than I expected. By Saturday morning, the day of the wedding, my phone was already vibrating across the counter before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. Unknown numbers, voicemails, messages stacking one over another. I didn't answer a single one. Outside, the city was quiet. Light rain misted the glass of my apartment windows, soft and steady. For the first time in months, I wasn't rushing anywhere. I wasn't fixing anything. I just stood there barefoot on the tile, listening to the sound of my phone buzzing itself breathless. At 9:12 a.m., someone pounded on my door. I didn't have to check the peephole. I already knew. When I opened it, my family filled the doorway like a storm cloud. My mother's lipstick was smudged. My father's tie was loose and uneven. Aaron's face was pale beneath the frantic blush of stress. And behind him, Madeline, perfect curls, slightly frizzed from the rain mascara, bleeding just enough to ruin her perfection. "What did you do?" she demanded before I could speak. Her voice cracked on the word "you." I didn't answer. I stepped aside just enough for them to come in. They did, stomping past me like an intervention team. My apartment smelled like coffee and quiet defiance. "The vendors are refusing to show up," Aaron said, his voice breaking between anger and disbelief. "The venue's locked, the caterer isn't answering, and what the hell is going on, Elena?" I took my time setting my mug down. "They're not refusing," I said evenly. "They're following instructions." Madeline's jaw dropped. "You canceled our wedding." "Our wedding?" I echoed softly. "Funny. I thought you said I didn't belong there." Her eyes flashed. "You can't just— This is insane. We have 150 guests arriving in 2 hours." I met her gaze, calm as a still lake. "You have 150 guests and no wedding. That's what happens when you erase the person who paid for it." Aaron rubbed his forehead like he was trying to massage sense into the moment. "You're being petty." "No," I said. "I'm being done." Madeline's voice turned sharp, desperate. "You can't do this. You signed contracts." I walked to the table and tapped the thick binder sitting there, the same one I'd carried out of the rehearsal. "Yes, I signed them. Not you. Every contract, every payment, every receipt is under my name, and every single one included a cancellation clause. I didn't even lose money." My mother finally spoke, voice trembling between fury and pleading. "Elena, be reasonable. People have flown in from across the country. This is Aaron's wedding." I turned to her. "And yesterday when I said I was being pushed out of it, you told me to be the bigger person. This is me being the bigger person. I didn't show up to ruin anything. I just stopped funding my own humiliation." The room went quiet. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the windows like an impatient clock. Aaron finally looked at me, eyes red. "I never wanted this." "Didn't you?" I asked. "You watched it happen. You let her speak to me that way. Let Mom excuse it. Let Dad look away. You didn't want to stop it because it was easier to let me take it." He swallowed, hard guilt flickering across his face. Madeline reached for his arm, but he pulled slightly back, just enough for her to notice. "I thought you'd understand," Aaron said softly. "You always fix things." "That's the problem," I said. "You all assumed I would." Madeline suddenly stepped closer, voice cracking. "Elena, please, we can fix this. Just call them. We'll make it right. You can come to the wedding. Sit wherever you want." Now it was my turn to laugh. Quiet, not cruel, just tired. Now I'm invited after all this. She blinked fast, mascara pooling under her eyes. "I didn't mean it the way it sounded. You meant every word I said. You wanted the money, not me." My father finally set down his hands, voice low. "Elena, enough. You've made your point." "Have I?" I asked. Because the point was never about the money. It was about respect. And apparently you all needed a financial disaster to notice the difference. Silence again, except for the sound of Madeline's soft sobs muffled behind her hands. Aaron looked at me. Really looked for the first time since we were kids. The realization on his face wasn't anger anymore. It was shame. He said quietly, "So, it's really over." I nodded. "For you, maybe. For me, it's just beginning." He opened his mouth like he might argue, then shut it again. The weight of his own silence seemed to press down harder than any words I could have thrown. When they finally left the door closed with a final heavy sound. I stood there for a moment staring at it, then turned back toward the window. Through the glass, I could see the gray skyline blurred by rain. Somewhere across town, 150 guests were probably checking their watches, wondering why the ceremony hadn't started. I poured myself another cup of coffee, steady hands this time, and sat on the couch, listening to the hum of quiet justice. My phone buzzed again and again, each vibration softer, more frantic, then finally, still. Later that night, I heard from Miles. "You good?" he asked over the phone. I looked around my apartment, clean, calm, peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I said, "Yeah, I am." The next morning, headlines in the local society pages read, "High-profile lake, wedding canceled, last-minute vendors blame miscommunication." But I knew better. It wasn't miscommunication, it was revelation. The kind that costs you everything fake and gives you back everything real. 3 months later, summer was already fading when the second wedding happened. Smaller, quieter, stripped of everything that used to scream perfection. Aaron and Madeline finally married in a local restaurant. No lake view, no string quartet, no curated floral arch. Just a few tables, a simple meal, and bills they paid themselves. I went, not out of obligation, but because the anger had cooled into something cleaner boundaries. They'd invited me properly this time, handwritten card and apology from Aaron tucked inside. "You were right. I should have stood up for you. It wasn't everything, but it was enough." When I walked in, heads turned. There was no tension, just acknowledgement. Madeline greeted me with a cautious smile, her voice softer, almost human. "Thank you for coming." I met her eyes. "Thank you for the invitation." That was all. No drama, no grand forgiveness, just adults standing in the wreckage of their own choices, learning to be decent again. After dinner, Aaron and I stepped outside for air. The night was warm, the kind of Seattle evening that still smelled faintly of rain. "I still can't believe you did it," he said, a hint of awe in his voice. "I didn't do anything I said. I just stopped." He nodded slowly, understanding, settling into his expression. It needed to happen. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It did." We didn't need to rehash the details. He'd learned the hard way that money doesn't buy loyalty, it exposes it. Later that week, I used part of the refunded deposits to take a solo trip to Italy. No schedules, no family obligations. Just me, my passport, and the kind of silence that finally felt earned. I spent mornings sipping espresso on quiet terraces, watching strangers laugh, realizing I didn't owe anyone a single explanation for my peace. When I got back, I moved my business to a smaller office closer to home. Miles teased me about early retirement, but really it was something else. I wasn't shrinking, I was choosing. For the first time, my life felt mine. Not borrowed, not bargained. Mine. If you've ever been the person holding everything together while everyone else tears you down, listen closely. Walking away isn't cruelty. It's clarity. So tell me, have you ever stopped fixing and finally started living? That day taught me something no textbook ever could love without respect is just manipulation dressed in family colors. You can give people everything, time, money, loyalty, and they'll still treat it like air until it's gone. So if you're watching this, wondering when it's okay to stop giving, this is your sign. Walk away. Let them face the silence they built. If this story hit close to home, tell me where you're listening from and what you'd have done in my place. Subscribe for more stories of betrayal justice and quiet strength.
My name is Jennifer Bennett. I'm 32 years old, and I used to believe that love was about proving you were enough. Now I know that if you have to prove it, it was never love in the first place. When I think back to those early days with Marcus, I see them in soft tones. Coffee steam, curling through morning light, laughter spilling over burnt pancakes, his lazy smile when I tucked my hair behind my ear. We were two people building a world out of small gestures, or so I thought. Marcus was the kind of man who filled a room without trying. Sharp suit, sharper ambition. He worked in marketing strategy for a luxury brand and carried himself like every decision he made had weight. I admired that once the focus, the drive. I used to joke that he never walked anywhere he advanced. I was steadier, an illustrator who freelanced from home drawing quiet things, faces, raincoats, Little moments people didn't notice. We were opposites that made sense until his old world started creeping into ours. The first time I heard Melissa Crane's name, it was over dinner. He mentioned her casually, the way people mention weather. Melissa just got promoted again, regional creative director. I smiled, because that's what supportive girlfriends do. That's great for her. He nodded, eyes still on his phone. Yeah, she always knew how to chase the next thing. Bold girl. It was nothing then, just a name. But like a hairline crack in glass, it spread silently through everything. Over time, Melissa became a presence in our apartment. Not in body, but in comparison. She was the measuring stick against which I didn't know I was being measured. Melissa loved scuba diving. Melissa could handle high-pressure clients. Melissa never settled. I remember one Sunday morning, pancakes again, the ritual I clung to. I poured the batter wrong and ruined the first one. Marcus laughed, but it had an edge. Melissa used to say the first one's always a test run. Then I must be failing the test, I said lightly. He kissed my forehead. Don't be so sensitive, babe. I'm just saying she had this perfectionist streak. It should have rolled off me. Instead, it clung. Every just saying felt like a pinprick, and I was running out of skin. Months passed, and I found myself changing quietly, trying to fit invisible criteria. I learned to order his favorite wine, read the same business books he quoted. I bought a blazer that made me feel like someone who made power moves. But inside, I was exhausted performing competence when all I'd ever wanted was connection. Sometimes at night, I'd lie awake watching the shadows across the ceiling and wonder when admiration had turned into audition. One evening, I came home early from a client meeting, determined to surprise him. I made his favorite garlic shrimp linguine and set the table with the fancy plates we rarely used. He walked in still on a call. I waited for the smile, the warmth. Instead, he waved for quiet and mouthed Melissa. I turned back to the stove, pretending not to hear the way his voice softened. You deserve that promotion, he said. You always did. When he hung up, I asked, trying to sound casual. How's Melissa these days? She's great, he said too quickly. Just work stuff. Then he looked at me with faint irritation, as if my curiosity were a breach of professionalism. I didn't push it, but that night I tasted metal instead of shrimp. The comparisons weren't always spoken aloud. Sometimes they lived in the silence between what he said and what he didn't. When I showed him a sketch I was proud of, he'd nod, distractedly murmuring, Looks good. You ever think about doing something bigger, like a startup design firm? Bennett Slation. Be more like her. I told myself he just wanted the best for me. That's what love was, right? Pushing each other to grow. But growth shouldn't feel like erosion. A year in the fracture lines deepened. We argued about nothing and everything, how I spent my days, my lack of urgency, my preference for quiet dinners over rooftop events. Once after I declined a networking party he wanted me to attend, he sighed. You know, Melissa would have loved that kind of crowd. She thrived on energy. Then maybe you should have stayed with her, I snapped before I could stop myself. The air froze. He stared at me as if I'd just broken something precious. Wow. You really don't know how to take a joke, do you? That was his favorite escape hatch, call it a joke, make me the humorless one. The weeks that followed were a blur of polite distance. We still said I love you, but it sounded like a formality, a placeholder for what used to be real. Our 4-year anniversary was coming up, and I decided to fix it the only way I knew how, by proving my worth. I saved up and booked a reservation at La Maison du Lys, the kind of place where the menu doesn't have prices and the waiters whisper. I imagined us laughing again, remembering why we started. I even wore the red dress he once said made me look like I belonged in a gallery painting. The night of the dinner, he showed up late, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his usual brand. I tried not to notice. At first, everything seemed fine. We clinked glasses, traded stories about work. Then, somewhere between appetizers and mains, the shift happened. He glanced at his phone, smiled. Melissa just got engaged, he said, like he was announcing a stock price. To some venture capitalist. They're in Iceland right now. Engagement photos under the northern lights. I froze mid-bite. That's lovely. He shrugged. Say what you want, but she never settled. She always reached higher. You have to admire that. My pulse thudded in my ears. I forced a smile. I admire lots of things. Kindness for one. He chuckled, missing or ignoring the sting. You always make things about feelings. That's what keeps you small, Jennifer. You play it safe." There it was, the word that had haunted me for months, safe. I looked at him across the candlelight. For the first time, he felt like a spinnacher who'd wandered into my life by accident. I think I said quietly, "You're mistaking peace for boredom." He blinked, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I said setting down my fork. If you want chaos, maybe you should go chase it." He stared, trying to gauge if I was serious. I smiled, but it wasn't the kind he'd recognize. "Happy anniversary, Marcus," I whispered, standing up. Then I left. Outside, the night air was sharp tasting of rain and release. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just walked, heels clicking like punctuation marks on the pavement. Behind me, the restaurant's laughter and clinking glasses faded into nothing. Ahead, the city stretched wide and unknowable. That was the moment I stopped trying to prove my worth and started remembering it. If anyone had told me that freedom could taste like heartbreak, I would have laughed. But that night, standing outside La Maison du Lys, my breath turning to mist in the cool air, I realized freedom isn't a clean break. It's jagged. It cuts on its way out. I didn't go home immediately. I walked, past glowing shop windows, through the chatter of couples spilling out of bars until my heels ached. I wanted to feel something, pain relief, anger, but all I felt was empty. When I finally got home, the apartment felt too curated, too quiet. Every object inside bore Marcus's invisible fingerprint. The wine glasses he'd chosen for aesthetic, the books he'd stacked to look intellectual, not to be read. I poured myself water instead of wine because I refused to toast to the end of us. The next morning he texted, "Marcus, we need to talk. Don't do this dramatic disappearing act." Me. "There's nothing left to talk about." Marcus. "You're overreacting. It was just an observation. You can't handle criticism without turning it into a crisis." There it was, the same tone he'd always used when I tried to express pain, the one that made me doubt my own perception. I typed and deleted a dozen replies before writing the only one that mattered. Me, no Marcus. I'm just finally listening to myself. Then I blocked his number. For the first time in 4 years, my phone was quiet. No notifications, no buzzing, no constant hum of someone's expectations in my pocket. The silence was unbearable for exactly 2 days. On the third, it became peaceful. I threw myself into work, though I could barely concentrate. My sketches were stiff, too controlled. Every time I tried to draw something lighthearted, it came out fractured. Still, I kept trying. Routine became my lifeline: morning coffee, emails, long walks. Anything to avoid staring at the space where his shoes used to sit by the door. But grief is a spenitage thing. It sneaks up during the smallest moments, like when I caught a whiff of his cologne on a scarf I hadn't worn since winter, or when a commercial played the same piano instrumental we danced to one New Year's Eve. My mind betrayed me with kindness, replaying the good parts, the way he used to trace lazy circles on my wrist. When we watched movies, the warmth of his laugh before ambition hardened it. Then just as quickly, it reminded me why I left. There's a difference between missing someone and missing who you thought they were. One Friday evening, I met Rachel, my best friend since college, for dinner. She took one look at me and groaned. "Tell me you're not still being polite about him." I poked at my salad. "I'm just trying not to hate him. Hate feels heavy." "Jennifer, you don't have to hate him, but you do need to stop protecting his image." She leaned in, voice low. "You always wanted to be his calm, but maybe he needed a storm to wake up. That's not your failure." Her words hit deeper than I wanted to admit. I kept thinking if I worked harder, he'd see me. Rachel reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "He saw you, Mia. He just didn't know what he was looking at." That night, I went home and deleted the last photo I had of us. Our smiles too polished, our hands already distant. A week later, I got an email from one of Marcus's colleagues asking if I'd still be attending the firm's charity gala. Apparently, he hadn't told anyone about the breakup. For a moment, I hovered over the Yes RSVP button. Old habits die hard. Then I smiled to myself, closed the email, and opened a new canvas on my tablet instead. The drawing that came out surprised me. A woman standing under a rainstorm, her face tilted upward, letting it fall without flinching. I titled it Unlearning. Months slipped by in shades of progress. I started painting again, taking on commissions that felt meaningful, not marketable. Rachel called it emotional rehab. I called it survival. Some days I was fine. Other days I woke up missing the sound of a second toothbrush tapping against the sink. Healing, I learned, isn't linear. Then one evening in late March, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I hesitated before answering. Hello. A pause, then a familiar voice, soft, uncertain. Jennifer, it's me. Marcus. Yeah. His voice cracked slightly. I wanted to check in, see how you're doing. I almost laughed. The audacity. You're checking in. I know you hate me right now, he rushed on. But I've been thinking, maybe we both said things we didn't mean. I gripped the phone tighter. No, Marcus, you said exactly what you meant. You just didn't expect me to listen. He was silent. I imagined him standing somewhere expensive and sterile like his condo, all glass and echo. You don't have to do this pride thing, he said finally. You know me better than anyone. I did. I corrected. And that's the problem. Then I hung up. After that night, I deleted his contact for good. I told Rachel the next day. She grinned. You didn't just close the door, you welded it shut. Yeah, I said, half smiling. But sometimes I still press my ear to it. She nodded. You will, until one day you don't even remember which door it was. April melted into May, and with each week, I felt myself returning to the woman I'd been before, only stronger. I started running again, sleeping better, even smiling without realizing it. But every Bennett's formation demands a trigger. Mine came unexpectedly from someone I hadn't heard from in years. One afternoon, my phone rang. The name flashed across the screen, Ryan Reed, Marcus's younger brother. My pulse quickened. I almost declined, but curiosity won. When I answered, his tone was awkward, careful. Hey, Jennifer, sorry to call out of nowhere. I just thought you should know something. What is it? He hesitated. It's about Marcus and Melissa. The name dropped like a pebble into still water. I hadn't heard it aloud in months. Ryan exhaled. They got engaged last month. But there's more. She made him sign this insane prenup. Basically, if they split, he gets nothing. Not a cent. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Ryan kept talking, his words tumbling over each other. He's miserable, Mia. Says she monitors every expense. Won't even let him buy a car without approval. I thought you should know. I smiled faintly, staring out the window at the fading light. Why? So I can feel sorry for him. He was quiet. I just thought you'd want to know he regrets it. No. Regret. The same word I used to whisper into my pillow back when I thought I'd be the one carrying it forever. But now it didn't sting. It felt distant, like watching rain hit a window I wasn't standing behind anymore. Tell him, I said softly, that some lessons are only learned in silence. Then I ended the call. The phone slipped from my hand onto the couch. Outside, thunder rolled low and steady. It wasn't vengeance that warmed me. It was peace. The night Ryan called, thunder rolled like a slow drum over the city. I sat by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass, and for the first time in months, I didn't flinch at the sound of Marcus's name. It was just noise now, background weather. That's when I realized the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was sacred. After the breakup, I used to fill every quiet moment with distractions, music, podcasts, phone calls, anything to drown out the echo of what I'd lost. But silence has a way of reshaping itself once you stop running from it. It stops sounding like absence and starts sounding like clarity. I woke early the next morning, made coffee, and opened my sketchbook. My hands trembled a little. For months, every line I drew felt uncertain, like even the paper doubted me. But now something inside had shifted. I didn't draw Marcus. I didn't draw heartbreak. I drew space. A woman walking barefoot on cracked ground, the wind in her hair, the world stretching wide around her. It wasn't beautiful. It was honest. That same afternoon, Rachel came over uninvited as usual, carrying a grocery bag filled with snacks and cheap wine. You look different, she said, kicking off her shoes. Peaceful. Creepy peaceful. Like you joined a monastery. I laughed. Just detoxing from chaos. Good. About time. You've been breathing other people's expectations for years. She plopped onto the couch, tearing open a bag of chips. So what's the new chapter? I hesitated. I don't know yet, but I'm not writing it for anyone else this time. Rachel nodded approvingly. That's my girl. Now drink this before I decide you've become enlightened and leave. We sat there watching a terrible rom-com, eating chips straight from the bag, and for the first time in a long time, I felt normal. No performance, no proving, just being. A few days later, I went to the gym for the first time in years. Not to change my body, but to reclaim it. Each weight I lifted was a word I'd never said. Each exhale was an apology I no longer owed. That night, while stretching, I noticed something spinatage on my phone, a text from an unknown number. Unknown. Hey, it's me. No name, no greeting. Just me. My stomach tightened. I knew that tone like a scar. I didn't answer. I didn't even open the thread. I simply turned off my phone, set it face down, and went to sleep. The old me would have replied half out of guilt, half out of habit. The new me understood that silence was also a response, and sometimes the loudest one. The next morning, I met a new client at a small cafe downtown. He was a kind man in his late 40s who wanted illustrations for a children's book about courage. It's about a little bird who forgets how to fly, he explained. She keeps watching others take off, but can't remember how she used to do it herself. I smiled, something tugging in my chest. That's beautiful, he shrugged. I think it's about starting again. When he left, I stayed behind, sketching ideas on napkins. My bird wasn't small or weak. She had scars on her wings and eyes that had seen storms. That afternoon, I realized I wasn't just illustrating his story, I was drawing my own. By April, the world was soft again. I found myself humming when I cooked, lingering longer in the shower, laughing too loud at Rachel's jokes. I didn't feel like I was healing anymore. I felt like I was living. But life as I was learning loves its ironies. Because just when everything settled, Marcus reappeared. It started small, a message from another unknown number. Unknown. I saw one of your drawings online. You've gotten even better. I stared at the screen, heartbeat steady. Then I missed that side of you. I deleted it without replying. A day later, another came. She doesn't get me like you did. I blocked that one too. 3 days after that, be a woman and talk to me, Jennifer. I almost laughed. Be a woman. As if silence made me less one. That night, I met Rachel at our usual rooftop bar. The city glowed beneath us, neon alive and unapologetic. I told her about the texts. She snorted. He's not texting you because he loves you. He's texting because his reflection cracked, and you're the only mirror that ever made him look good. I sipped my drink, smiling. Well, this mirror is not available anymore. When I got home, I opened my window and let the wind in. The curtains billowed like wings. I thought about how I used to shrink to make room for him, how I used to hold my breath so his dreams could breathe. Not anymore. The next morning, I unblocked my phone, not to read anything, but because I wasn't afraid of what might come through anymore. I wasn't avoiding ghosts. I'd already outlived them. That afternoon, I received a new message, not from Marcus, but from an unknown sender with a different kind of tone. Unknown. Hey, this is Charlie from the art workshop last month. We're doing a gallery night this Friday. Thought you might want to come. I blinked, smiling despite myself. Charlie. Kind eyes, slightly messy hair, the one who'd said, your drawings feel like they're breathing. Maybe silence wasn't the end of my story. Maybe it was just the space I needed to hear a new one beginning. That Friday I went. The gallery was small, but alive with color walls, lined with paintings that looked like confessions in pigment. Charlie spotted me near the back, waved, then pointed to a canvas I hadn't expected to see my own. Unlearning. I asked if they'd hang it, he said when I approached. Hope that's okay. I stared at it at the woman in the rain with her face tilted toward the sky. It's more than okay. He smiled softly. You know she doesn't look lost to me. No, he shook his head. She looks free. Something in my chest unknotted. I didn't blush, didn't deflect. I just said, maybe she finally is. When I got home that night, my apartment no longer felt haunted. It felt mine. I watered the plant that somehow hadn't died, put my phone on silent, and stood by the window again. The city lights reflected faintly in the glass, and for a split second I caught my own reflection looking back, not the woman Marcus had measured, but the woman who had finally learned to measure herself. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing the curtain against my arm. It felt like a whisper, not of regret, but of peace. The text came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon while I was mixing paint. The sky outside was the dull gray of unfinished business. Ryan Reed. I hadn't seen that name flash on my phone in over a year. For a second, I thought it was a mistake, maybe a wrong number, a scam, a ghost from the past pressing the wrong button. But curiosity has a cruel gravity. Ryan. Hey, Jennifer, hope you're doing okay. Do you have a minute? I stared at the words, the faint paint stain drying on my thumb. Ryan was Marcus's younger brother, the quiet one, the observer. He had always been kind to me in a way Marcus rarely noticed. Still old instincts kicked in. I almost ignored it. Then, against my better judgment, I replied, "Me. Hey, Ryan. Yeah, what's going on?" The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Ryan, it's about Marcus." The world didn't tilt, but my stomach did. "Me. What about him?" He called. His voice sounded older, heavier. The easy laughter I remembered from family barbecues was gone. "Jennifer," he began carefully. "I wouldn't call unless I thought you should know. I saw him last week. He's not in a great place." I leaned back on my stool. "That sounds like his problem, not mine." "I know," Ryan said quickly, "and you have every right to feel that way. But listen, he's with Melissa now. You probably heard I hadn't, but I didn't let him know that. I figured. They got engaged about 6 months ago." Ryan continued. "But it's complicated." "Complicated how?" There was a long pause, like he was deciding whether to betray a confidence. Then she made him sign a prenup, a brutal one. He doesn't get anything if they split, not even his share of the apartment she bought. She basically treats him like an employee. He has to log every expense, Jennifer, every single one. I said nothing, just listened to the faint static on the line. "He's miserable," Ryan went on. "She controls everything. His schedule, his money, even who he talks to. He said she calls it structure. I could almost see it, the same confidence Marcus once admired in Melissa now weaponized against him. The hunter becoming the hunted." Ryan's voice dropped. "He talks about you, you know. Says you were the only one who made him feel safe." Safe. The word landed like a dull blade, the very thing he used to scorn. The thing he said made me small. Now it was the thing he missed most. I took a slow breath. "Ryan, I appreciate you calling, but whatever's happening between them isn't my business." It stopped being my business the day he walked out of that restaurant. "I get that," Ryan said, almost pleading. He's not doing great." I stood pacing the studio. My fingers brushed against the rough edge of my canvas, the one Charlie had helped me hang after the gallery night. "Then he should learn," I said softly. "We all have to eventually." Ryan was quiet. "I'm sorry, Jennifer," he said finally. "You didn't deserve any of what happened." "I know," I said and meant it. "Take care of your brother." Then I hung up. Afterward, I didn't cry. I didn't even feel vindicated. I just stood there staring at the wet streak of cobalt blue dripping down my canvas, watching how it bled into white, like something surrendering. There was a time when I would have imagined that phone call as an apology through proxy, a message from the universe that I'd been right all along. But truthfully, it didn't feel like justice. It felt like closure wearing ordinary clothes. I wiped my hands on a rag, walked to the kitchen, and made tea. The steam rose in curls, soft and unhurried. Outside, a beam of sun broke through the gray and hit the counter in a slant of gold. It felt symbolic, though I wasn't sure of what. Maybe of the difference between revenge and release. That weekend, Rachel and I met for brunch. She had a new haircut and her usual brutal honesty. So she said, between bites of avocado toast, "You gonna tell me why your face looks like you just read someone's obituary and didn't hate it?" I rolled my eyes. Ryan called. Her fork froze midair. "Ryan." As in Marcus's baby brother. "Ryan." I nodded. Apparently Marcus's engagement isn't going well. The prenup's a nightmare. He's miserable. Rachel leaned back, smirking. "And let me guess part of you enjoyed hearing that." I stirred my coffee. Maybe a little. But mostly I felt tired. "Tired is progress," she said, pointing her fork at me. "Means you're done fighting ghosts." I smiled. "You should put that on a mug." "I will, and I'll send you royalties." We laughed, and for once it didn't feel like laughter built over pain. It was just easy, real. That night I dreamed of Marcus, but not the way I used to. He wasn't cruel or charming, or even remorseful. He was small, sitting at a table, papers scattered around him. Maybe the prenup Ryan mentioned, while Melissa stood in the doorway talking on her phone, her voice cold and clipped. He looked up at me in the dream and said, "I thought I wanted power. I didn't answer. I just turned and walked away." When I woke, the dream clung to me like fog, but there was no ache, only clarity. 2 days later, my phone buzzed again. A different unknown number. I didn't recognize it, but I knew. I always knew. Unknown. "You were right about everything. She's not who I thought she was. I can't breathe around her." I sat on the couch, the message glowing in the dim light. I could almost hear his voice again, that persuasive tone that once talked me into doubting myself. But this time it was only words on a screen. Just pixels. I typed a reply, paused, then deleted it. Instead, I opened my music app, played the song I'd avoided for months, the one we used to dance to. It didn't hurt anymore. It just sounded like another song. Then, with steady hands, I tapped block. The next morning, Charlie stopped by my studio to drop off coffee. He leaned against the doorframe, his usual gentle grin in place. "You look like you slept well." "I did," I said, surprised to realize it was true. "Good," he said, "because we're taking a day off. The weather's perfect, and I'm kidnapping you for a drive to the coast." I laughed. "Kidnapping, huh? That's bold." "Artist orders," he said, handing me a cup. "You've earned some sunlight." I hesitated for a heartbeat, the old reflex of guilt, as if joy needed permission. Then I nodded. "Give me 5 minutes." As we drove along the highway, the ocean came into view, vast, endless, forgiving. Charlie turned the music low. "You ever think about what you'd say to him if he showed up again?" I looked out the window. Nothing. 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 I repeated. Silence says everything he refused to hear. Charlie smiled, eyes still on the road. "That's poetic. It's peace," I corrected. He glanced at me, sunlight spilling through the windshield. "Then I'm glad you found it." That evening, after he dropped me home, I stood by the window again, the same one I'd cried beside months ago. The city hummed softly outside. Somewhere, Marcus was probably rereading his own messages, looking for a response that would never come. Somewhere, Melissa was probably setting new boundaries he didn't like. And somewhere in between, my past had finally stopped echoing. I picked up my sketchbook and drew a single line, clean, straight, unbroken. Sometimes that's all healing is, one final line drawn in peace. It always starts the same way, unknown number, a small gray bubble that flashes across your screen and freezes you mid-breath. I was at the gym when the first one came through, a Monday evening. My headphones and my focus locked on the rhythmic count of reps. The phone buzzed on the bench beside me, and even before I looked, I knew. Unknown. "Hey, I saw a photo of you from the gallery. You look happy." I missed that smile. For a moment, I stared at it. Once that kind of message would have sent my heart racing, equal parts hope and pain. But now it was just data, text on glass. I placed the phone face down and finished my set. The barbell felt heavier than usual, but so did my piece. 2 days later, another one arrived. Unknown. "You were right about Melissa. About everything. I feel trapped." I didn't respond. I just whispered to myself, "Of course you do." Later that night, Rachel came over with Thai takeout and her usual blunt commentary. I told her about the messages. She grinned around a mouthful of noodles. "Congratulations. You've officially reached the regret tour stage. Every narcissist's greatest hit. Don't make it sound like a badge of honor," I said. "Oh, it is," she said. "It means you finally broke the spell. He's chasing an echo now." Her words hit deep, because that was exactly what it felt like, an echo. Not a voice calling for connection, but a hollow sound bouncing off the walls of his own regret. By Friday, the tone had shifted. Unknown. "Are you seriously ignoring me? After everything, unknown. You always talked about forgiveness. Where's that now? Unknown, be an adult and talk to me, Jennifer." I laughed, an actual laugh, full-bodied and incredulous. "Forgiveness," he said. The man who once measured my worth against another woman's now demanding closure on his schedule. I showed Rachel the texts and she whistled. "He's really leaning into the self-pity genre. I think he's confusing forgiveness with access," I said. She raised her glass. "Cheers to revoked access." We toasted, and for the first time I didn't feel anger or pity, just distance. A clean, beautiful distance. The following week, I started teaching weekend art workshops. Small groups, mostly women in their 30s and 40s, some divorced, some newly single, all trying to rediscover pieces of themselves. We painted in silence at first, the air heavy with unspoken stories. Then, gradually, laughter began to replace the quiet. One afternoon, a woman named Layla said, "I'm painting what I wish I could say to my ex." "What's that?" I asked. She smiled sadly. "That I survived him." Something inside me cracked open, not from pain but recognition, because I had too. That night when I got home, I poured myself tea and sat by the window. The city outside looked like a living organism, lights blinking, cars moving like arteries. My phone buzzed again. Unknown. "You think silence makes you strong. It just makes you cold. I was right about you." The old Jennifer might have cried, the one who once believed every accusation deserved an answer. But now I smiled. because that text said more about him than it ever could about me. I opened the thread, scrolled through the months of unanswered messages, and realized something simple. He was still trying to perform control even in defeat, and I was done being part of the show. Block! Just one tap, no tremor in my hand, no nostalgia, just finality. A week passed, then another. The quiet that followed felt different this time, not an empty pause, but a symphony of relief. I filled my days with creation instead of reaction. The studio walls bloomed with new canvases, women dancing in storms, women asleep on fields of color, women standing tall in darkness. Each one looked a little like me. Charlie visited, sometimes helping me hang paintings or bringing me lunch I didn't ask for. He had that rare kind of gentleness that didn't need to be announced. One afternoon, while adjusting a frame, he said, "You've got a real calm about you lately." I smiled. "That's because I stopped trying to earn peace from people who can't give it." He grinned. "Mind if I quote you on that? Only if you spell my name right." But peace doesn't mean forgetfulness. Sometimes memories still slip through the faint smell of his cologne in a crowd, the way certain songs still know my pulse. The difference now is that I don't chase them away. I let them pass like traffic noise outside a window. Present, but harmless. One rainy afternoon, I received an email from S. Benetger. The subject line read, "Your work moved me." It was from a woman named Claire who'd seen my piece Unlearning at the gallery. She wrote, "I left a man who made me feel small. Your painting looked like the moment I walked out. Thank you for showing what freedom looks like." I read the message twice, then pressed a hand to my chest. For so long, I thought my story was one of failure, a woman who couldn't hold on to the man she loved. But maybe it wasn't failure. Maybe it was testimony. That night I painted again, not sadness, not revenge, but light. 2 weeks later, as if the universe were testing my resolve, another unknown number appeared. Unknown, you'll never find someone who understands you like I did. I looked at the message for a long time. Then I whispered to the quiet room, "You're right. I already did." My eyes flicked to the photo pinned above my desk, a candid of me and Charlie from the gallery night. No drama, no fireworks, just warmth. Real understanding doesn't demand performance. It just stays. I set the phone down and turned back to my canvas. Outside, the rain had stopped. The world smelled new. I dipped my brush into yellow, the color of sunrise, and began again. It's Spanish how a year can pass without you realizing when the healing became habit. One day you wake up and the quiet isn't heavy anymore. It's home. That morning, sunlight spilled through my apartment like forgiveness. The air smelled faintly of paint and jasmine tea. My plants, once on the brink of death, were thriving, little green proof that consistency, not intensity, is what keeps things alive. I stood before the mirror, tying my hair into a loose bun, and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked lighter, not untouched by pain, but reshaped by it. A year since that dinner. A year since the night I walked out of La Maison du Lit and into myself. And I hadn't heard from Marcus in months. Not a message, not a whisper. His absence had finally stopped echoing. I poured coffee into my favorite mug, the one Rachel had made me, that said, "Safe is not small." She'd given it to me the day I launched my online portfolio, insisting I needed a reminder that my piece wasn't mediocrity, it was mastery. The website had unexpectedly taken off. Commissions trickled in from Aspenitgers who'd seen Unlearning at the gallery. I wasn't famous, but for the first time I was fulfilled. Every drawing felt like an unspoken truth finding its shape. Charlie had become a quiet fixture in that world. He never pushed, never demanded to be the center of it. He'd just show up with coffee with a new brush, with that grin that said, "You've got this." He wasn't a savior. He was a witness. And sometimes that's all healing needs, a steady presence that doesn't need to fix you. That afternoon, I met Charlie at a cozy cafe downtown, the same one where we'd met months ago for the gallery night. The barista knew our order by heart. He arrived first, sketchbook in hand, grinning. "You're 5 minutes late. I call it artistic timing." He laughed. "Then I'll stop wearing a watch." We spent an hour talking about everything and nothing. His design project, my latest commission, the cat Rachel was threatening to adopt. When I laughed, it wasn't the kind of laugh you force to prove you're fine. It was effortless, real. And then as I reached for my bag, I froze. At the door, standing there hesitant but unmistakable Marcus. He looked smaller, not physically, but in presence. The sharp suit was gone, replaced by a rumpled button-down. His confidence, the thing he used to wear like armor, hung off him like an old coat. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, time rewound the restaurant, the rain, the ache. He smiled weakly. Jennifer. Charlie followed my gaze, his brow furrowing. You okay? I nodded slowly. Yeah, just surprised. Marcus hesitated, then approached the table. Can I talk to you? Just for a second. I looked at Charlie. He gave a small nod. I'll grab us refills. As he walked to the counter, Marcus took the seat across from me. Up close, he looked tired. His hands fidgeted with the sleeve of his shirt. You look good. I am, I said simply. He exhaled the sound somewhere between a sigh and a confession. Melissa and I were done. She left. I'm not surprised. He blinked at the flatness in my tone. I thought you'd at least, I don't know, react. To what you reaping, what you sowed. He flinched. I deserve that. Yeah, I said. You do. For a long moment, he stared at his hands. I just wanted to tell you you were right. About everything. I thought ambition made me powerful. Turns out it just made me alone. I leaned back, my heartbeat steady. He looked up, eyes glistening. I keep thinking about that night. How calm you were when you walked away. I didn't understand it then. Do you now? He swallowed. I think so. You'd already started leaving long before you stood up. That was true. I had. Quietly in the spaces where love turned into labor. I'm sorry, he said finally, for everything I took for granted. I studied him, really looked at him. The man who once made me question if kindness was enough. And for the first time, I saw not the villain of my story, but the chapter I'd already finished reading. I'm not going to say, I told you so, I said softly. That would mean I've been thinking about it, or about you. He blinked, as if the air had been knocked out of him. I haven't, I added. His voice cracked. You really mean that I do? Just then, Charlie returned with 2 coffees. Everything okay here? Everything's fine, I said, turning to him with an easy smile. We were just finishing. Marcus's gaze flickered between us, the comfortable silence, the unforced warmth, and something in his face shifted. He realized. Too late, but he realized. I should go, he said, standing. Take care of yourself, Jennifer. I already do, I replied. He paused as if waiting for me to look back. I didn't. He left quietly, the door chime soft behind him. Charlie sat sliding the cup toward me. Old flame, old lesson, I said. He chuckled. Seemed like he needed that reminder more than you did. Maybe, I said, but I needed to see it too, to know I'm really free. Charlie reached across the table, brushing his thumb against the back of my hand. Then here's to freedom. I raised my cup in a small toast, and to not mistaking peace for boredom. He smiled. Exactly. Outside, the sun slipped low, painting the windows in gold. That night when I got home, I took the last remaining photo of Marcus and me from years ago, hidden in an old drawer, and placed it in a box labeled The Past. Then I tucked it away, not out of bitterness, but gratitude. He wasn't the villain in my story. He was the test that proved I'd finally learned the lesson. And as I stood there, surrounded by quiet and the faint smell of turpentine and tea, I realized something simple, profound, and whole. I'd never needed closure from him. I'd already given it to myself. It's been 14 months since I walked out of that restaurant, 14 months since I stopped mistaking survival for love. Some mornings I still wake before dawn. The city hums faintly outside the sky, pale and waiting. I make tea, open the window, and let the wind in. It smells different now, not of rain and endings, but of new beginnings quietly unfolding. I don't replay our story anymore. I remember it the way you remember an old scar, not with pain, but with recognition. Proof that I lived, that I healed, that I learned. That weekend, Charlie and I drove up to the coast. It wasn't an anniversary or an escape, just something spontaneous. He liked to call them breathing trips. We'd pack too many snacks, pick a random playlist, and drive until the city disappeared behind us. The ocean stretched ahead, vast, infinite, forgiving. We walked barefoot along the shoreline, our shadows long and blurred in the late afternoon light. Charlie skipped a stone across the water. Do you ever think about him? He asked softly. Marcus, I nodded once. Sometimes, but not the way I used to. It's more like remembering a storm. You don't resent the rain, you just remember that you learned to carry an umbrella. He smiled. You always have the best metaphors. I used to paint them to understand myself, I said. Now I just live them. We stood in comfortable silence. Waves hissed against the sand, retreating and returning like breath. Charlie turned to me. You know what I like about you? I raised an eyebrow. You only get one answer. Choose wisely. He grinned. You're calm, but not the kind of calm that hides fear. The kind that comes after surviving chaos. You wear peace like someone who earned it. I didn't respond right away. I just took his hand, our fingers intertwining with quiet certainty. Later that evening, we found a small seafood diner tucked off the road. The air smelled like salt and butter, the lights dim and soft. The kind of place where time slows down. Charlie ordered for both of us, remembering that I hated oysters, but loved clam chowder. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number again. My breath caught for a fraction of a second, old reflex. But when I flipped it over, it wasn't him. It was from the art gallery. Congratulations, Jennifer, your piece. Unlearning has been selected for the annual showcase, opening night next month. I laughed, startling the table beside us. Charlie looked up. Good news. I handed him the phone. They picked my painting. He grinned. Of course they did. That piece looks like it's breathing. I smiled. It feels like it too. The following month, the gallery buzzed with quiet applause and warm lights. Spinnaker stood in front of Unlearning, whispering, pointing, smiling. But what caught my eye wasn't the crowd, it was the reflection of myself in the glass. The woman in the painting, standing under the rain chin, tilted upward, looked freer than the one who painted her. But only slightly. Rachel showed up halfway through the event, holding a ridiculous bouquet of sunflowers. My favorite emotionally evolved friend, she shouted, causing 3 people to turn. You did it. I laughed. What did I do? Turn pain into art, she said, pressing the flowers into my hands, and art into power. I hugged her, breathing in the warmth of familiarity. You always make it sound grander than it feels. It is grand, she said. You just learn to live without needing applause for it. A week later, I received another message, this time from a woman I didn't know. Hi, Jennifer. I stumbled on your story online. I left someone who kept comparing me to his ex. Your words helped me remember that quiet doesn't mean weak. Thank you. I sat there for a long time, reading it again and again. For years, I'd thought the lesson was mine alone. But healing, I was learning, isn't meant to be hoarded. It's meant to be handed forward. Sometimes late at night, I wonder what Marcus's life looks like now. Maybe he's with someone new. Maybe he's alone. Maybe he's still chasing a version of himself that doesn't exist anymore. But it doesn't matter, because I no longer need to be the answer to his story. He was never my villain. He was my teacher, and the lesson was simple. Love should never make you disappear. Last Sunday, Charlie and I walked through the market near my building. The sky was orange, the air alive with chatter. He bought me tulips, even though I told him not to. We stopped at a coffee stand, sharing a cup too small for 2 people, and laughed when foam spilled onto our hands. He brushed my cheek with his thumb eyes warm. You're quiet, he said. I'm happy, I replied. I think they just sound the same sometimes. He nodded understanding. When I got home that night, I hung a new canvas blank untouched, waiting. I stood there for a while, brush in hand, not knowing what to paint. Then I smiled, because that's what freedom is, not knowing and not being afraid of it. I dipped my brush into gold and made the first stroke. Outside, the city lights shimmered. The air smelled of rain again, but this time I didn't brace myself. Because rain wasn't the enemy. It was the reminder that things grow after they fall. I looked out the window one last time, whispered to the night that once held my grief. I hope you find what you're looking for, Marcus. But my part in your story is over. Then I turned back to my canvas and kept painting. My name is Andrea Anderson. I'm 29 years old, and until recently, I believed loyalty could save anything. Even love. I thought if I gave enough, stayed patient enough, and kept showing up, he'd see it. He'd see me. But that night, the night he smirked and said I didn't deserve a man like him, something in me finally snapped. Scott and I had been together for 2 years. He was magnetic, the kind of man who made people turn their heads when he walked into a room. Confident, charming, always with that easy laugh that made you forget how cruel his words could be. I used to admire that about him. Where I was quiet, cautious, he was energy, unpredictable, alive. Together, I thought we balanced each other. But lately, that balance felt more like a weight pressing on my chest. It started small, like all heartbreaks do. Babe, that dress again, he'd say with a grin. You know it's cute, but maybe try something a little sexier next time. I'd laugh it off, pretending it didn't sting. Or when I drove him home after work. You really need a new car. The way this thing rattles, I feel like it's going to fall apart. He said it jokingly, but the way his eyes lingered on the dashboard like I was something cheap said otherwise. At first I told myself that's just how he was teasing, playful. But when the jokes come often enough, they stop sounding like jokes. They start sounding like the truth. He thrived on attention. I could feel it in the way he looked at his phone more than my face, the way he smiled at strangers just a little too long, the way he always had to be noticed. Meanwhile, I was invisible, the one who fixed, who waited, who made things easier. Some nights I'd catch him smirking at his phone thumbs flying across the screen, that secret look like he was part of a conversation I wasn't invited to. When I asked who it was, he'd shrug, relax, it's just friends. But his smile said otherwise. I knew the shape of lies, even unspoken ones. That night, the night everything changed, we were having dinner at his apartment. I had cooked like I always did. He barely touched the food, too busy scrolling. His phone kept lighting up. "Scott," I said quietly. "Can you put that away? I'm trying to talk to you." He didn't look up. "I am listening." "No, you're not," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "You're somewhere else lately. It's like I'm talking to a wall." That's when he looked up slowly, lazily, like he was bored of me. His thumb hovered over his screen, that smug little smile forming at the corner of his lips. And then he said it. "You don't deserve a man like me." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't angry. It was casual, careless, like he was commenting on the weather. For a second, I actually thought I misheard. "What did you just say?" He leaned back, still smiling. "I mean, come on, Andrea. You're nice, but I could have done better. I settled too soon, maybe." The room went quiet. Even the hum of the refrigerator faded. I stared at him, the man I'd sacrificed weekends for the one I'd comforted, through every failed deal, every tantrum about his boss. I thought of every night I stayed awake, waiting for his text, every apology I made for things that weren't my fault. He went back to scrolling, like my silence was an inconvenience. That's when I felt something inside me go still, not shattered, not burning, just still. I stood up slowly without a word. He didn't even glance up as I picked up my bag. "Where are you going?" he asked finally, half amused. "Home," I said. "Andrea?" "Don't be dramatic." I was joking. But it wasn't a joke. We both knew it. I walked to the door. Behind me, his voice followed, smug and lazy. "You'll call me tomorrow. You always do." I didn't answer. Outside, the night air hit my face like cold water. The city lights blurred my reflection, faint in the window of my car, mascara smudged, hands trembling, heart pounding. I sat there for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. I wasn't crying, not yet. I just felt tired. Tired of explaining myself to someone who never really listened, tired of pretending that his indifference didn't hurt. In that silence, I realized something. I had been loving him the way people love fire, hoping to stay warm without getting burned. But Scott, he never wanted warmth. He wanted worship. I didn't text him that night. I didn't call the next morning. He didn't either. For days we floated in silence, his ego certain I'd crawl back mine, slowly discovering that maybe I didn't need to. But silence is funny. It's not empty. It echoes. It fills every corner with memories you didn't ask to relive. The way he'd laugh and touch my hair when we first met. The nights he'd talk about his dreams about us. The first time he said he loved me, it had felt like sunlight. Now, remembering it felt like looking directly at something that used to glow and realizing it was just neon bright, fake temporary. I started to see the cracks I had ignored. The way he always took up space in every conversation. How I learned to make myself smaller so he could feel bigger. The way I apologized first, even when he was the one who crossed the line. I remembered the night I stayed up all night helping him finish a pitch because he was behind on work, and the next day he didn't even thank me. He just said, "You should have fixed the slides better." All of it hit at once, the little wounds that never bled until now. And for the first time in 2 years, I let myself feel it, all of it. The anger, the grief, the humiliation of realizing I had given everything to someone who thought I was average. But mixed with the ache was something else, relief. Because when someone shows you how little they value you, you don't have to guess anymore. You just have to leave. That night, I made a quiet promise to myself I would stop fighting to be seen by someone who preferred looking elsewhere. If he thought I didn't deserve him, fine. Maybe I deserved better. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the city outside my window. The world kept spinning, cars kept passing, life kept happening like my heartbreak didn't even register. And maybe that was the point. The universe doesn't pause for broken hearts. It just keeps moving, waiting for you to catch up. I wasn't ready to move yet, but for the first time, I wasn't waiting for him to notice. I closed my eyes and whispered to the darkness, "You're right, Scott. I don't deserve a man like you." Then softly, almost smiling, I deserve peace. It's strange how silence can feel heavier than words. After that night, Scott didn't call. Neither did I. But he didn't have to. I knew him well enough to know his silence wasn't guilt. It was arrogance. He thought he was teaching me a lesson, that if he ignored me long enough, I'd come crawling back like I always did. But this time I didn't. The first week was the hardest. My phone stayed quiet, and every vibration made my heart leap before disappointment settled back in. I'd tell myself I didn't care, but at night I'd scroll through old photos. The vacations, the coffee dates, the way he used to look at me like I was the only person in the room. I realized I had mistaken attention for affection. Scott's gaze was never about me. It was about the reflection of himself he saw in my eyes. By week 2, the loneliness turned to clarity. I stopped checking my phone, stopped rehearsing imaginary arguments in my head. I just stopped trying. And when you stop trying, you start noticing all the things you ignored before. The way he'd always forget his wallet at restaurants. The way I'd rearrange my schedule to fit his, but he never once did the same. The way he'd call me clingy for asking where he was, but show up furious if I didn't answer his text fast enough. I had been living in his orbit for so long that I forgot I had a world of my own. A month passed before I saw him again. It was at our mutual friend's birthday, Claire's, at a rooftop bar downtown. I almost didn't go. Something in me wanted to avoid the scene, the gossip, the way people's eyes would flicker with pity when they looked at me. But another part of me, the part that was done hiding, wanted to see him one last time, if only to remind myself why I walked away. I showed up late wearing a simple black dress. I didn't plan to look impressive, but when I caught my reflection in the mirror behind the bar, I realized I looked calm, like someone who'd finally stopped bleeding. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the music, it all felt distant until I heard his voice. Smooth, loud, confident. I turned, and there he was, Scott, and on his arm, a woman I didn't recognize. Tall, sleek, dressed in red with that same air of performance he loved so much. He didn't see me at first. He was too busy holding court, flashing that same rehearsed smile that once melted me. People laughed at his stories. The woman laughed the loudest. I stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, feeling something I hadn't expected, not pain, not jealousy, just pity. It wasn't until he noticed me that his charm faltered. His eyes flicked my way, and for a split second I saw surprise, maybe even discomfort. Then he smirked, recovered, and slipped an arm tighter around the woman's waist. Of course, he had to win the scene. The showman never leaves the stage. I turned to leave, but Claire stopped me, dragging me toward their group before I could refuse. Andrea. "You remember Scott, right?" she said, smiling too brightly. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice even. "I remember." The woman in red extended a hand, all polished confidence. "Hi, I'm Vanessa. Nice to meet you." My smile was polite, controlled. But Scott couldn't stand polite. He thrived on reaction. "So how have you been?" he asked, sipping his drink like we were casual acquaintances. "Good," I said. "Peaceful." That word peaceful landed like a dart. His smirk wavered. "Well, you look different," he said after a beat. "Different good or different bad?" He hesitated. "Different," he repeated, shrugging like it didn't matter. I was about to walk away when Vanessa leaned into him and whispered something that made him laugh loud, performative. And that laugh, that show of it, did something to me. Not anger, not heartbreak, just confirmation. He hadn't changed. He probably never would. I turned to Claire. "I'll be outside for a bit. Too warm in here." She nodded, sympathetic. Outside, the night air carried the faint hum of the city. I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath since he walked in. My hands were trembling slightly, not from sadness, but from adrenaline, the body's leftover response to old wounds. I was halfway through calming down when the door opened behind me. Of course. Scott stepped out alone this time. He leaned against the railing beside me, silent for a moment, trying to find the right words to sound casual. So he began, "You're avoiding me now." I didn't look at him. "I'm standing in the open. You came to me." He chuckled softly. "Still sharp, still arrogant," I replied. His smirk returned, the same one from that night. "Relax, Andrea. You don't have to act so cold. We were good together, weren't we?" "We were convenient for you," I said quietly. That's not the same thing. He frowned. You always twist things. Do I? Or do you just hate hearing yourself out loud? The silence between us stretched. He sighed dramatically like I was the exhausting one. You've changed, he said finally. Thank you, I answered. He looked at me, then really looked. There was something unreadable in his eyes, maybe realization, maybe resentment, but he wouldn't say sorry. Scott didn't do apologies. Instead, he said the one thing he thought would still hurt me. You'll regret walking away, Andrea. You won't find someone who understands you like I did. I turned to him, slowly met his gaze, and said calm and steady, maybe not. But at least I'll find someone who doesn't humiliate me to feel powerful. For once, he didn't have a comeback. He stared, waiting for me to crumble, to cry, to beg like before. But I just stepped past him, heels clicking against the concrete, each sound a reminder of my control, returning step by step. As I reached the door, I paused and looked back once. He was still leaning there, arms crossed, pretending not to care, but his jaw was tight, his posture defensive. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Inside, laughter filled the air. Again, real laughter this time. Not forced, not filtered through his shadow. My friends greeted me with smiles, unaware of the quiet battle that had just ended outside. And just like that, something shifted in me. Not victory, not relief. Just the quiet knowledge that I had finally stopped orbiting around him. That night, as I drove home through the sleeping city, I replayed his words, "You don't deserve a man like me." He was right in a way. I didn't deserve someone like him. I deserved better, and soon I would become it. People say time heals everything, but that's not true. Time doesn't heal, it just gives pain a different shape. Some mornings it's dull like background noise. Some nights it hits you out of nowhere, sharp and fresh again. That's how it was for me, after Scott. At first, everything reminded me of him. The coffee shop on Fifth where we used to meet. The smell of his cologne on the jacket he forgot to take back. Even certain ones I hadn't realized I'd memorized just from sitting beside him in his car. I tried to distract myself, but grief has a cruel way of filling silence with echoes. The second week after the party, I came home to my empty apartment and just sat there. No music, no TV, no noise. Just me and the hum of the refrigerator. It was strange, the quiet that used to feel lonely now felt clean, uncluttered. For 2 years, my life had revolved around someone else's moods, someone else's calendar. I didn't know who I was without him, but I was about to find out. I started small, morning runs before work, painting again, even though the canvases always ended up messy, reorganizing the apartment until it started to feel like mine again, not a museum of us. The first thing to go were the photos. I didn't tear them. I just placed them in a shoebox and taped it shut. Closure doesn't need violence. Sometimes it's just a gentle decision enough. At work, people noticed the change before I did. New haircut, my coworker Liam asked one morning. Something like that, I said, sipping my coffee. He smiled. Looks good on you. You seem lighter. That word stuck with me. Lighter. Not happier, not freer, but lighter. As if some invisible weight had finally lifted and I could breathe properly for the first time in years. Still, healing isn't linear. Some nights I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and reach for my phone before remembering there was no one to text, no one waiting for my goodnight. Other nights I'd scroll through social media, catch glimpses of Scott's new posts, the fake smiles, the weekend trips with Vanessa, and feel that familiar twist in my stomach. I'd tell myself not to look, but curiosity has claws. One evening I stopped mid-scroll and asked myself a hard question. What are you hoping to find? Proof he missed me. Evidence that he didn't. Either answer would hurt. So I closed the app, deleted it, and went for a walk instead. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement, and for once I didn't feel small in the world. I felt part of it, messy, uncertain, alive. Weeks turned into months. I joined a weekend pottery class. I reconnected with old friends, people I'd quietly pushed away while orbiting Scott's world. I even started saying yes to spontaneous things again, late-night karaoke, random road trips, dancing badly at weddings. Every yes felt like a tiny rebellion against the girl I used to be the one, who waited by the phone, who swallowed her hurt to keep someone else comfortable. And somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Scott, not even at myself. Anger had kept me company for a while. It made me feel strong, made me feel in control. But it was just another tether to him. Letting it go felt terrifying, but freeing. One Sunday morning, I found myself repainting the walls of my living room. The color had faded that dull beige he'd once said looked classy. I replaced it with something warmer, softer, a shade called Sunrise Blush. As the brush slid across the wall, I caught my reflection in the window. Hair messy shirt, splattered with paint music humming from the radio. And for the first time, I smiled and thought, this is what peace looks like. It wasn't loud, it wasn't cinematic, it was a quiet victory, one I'd earned without him. Every so often, I'd bump into mutual friends. They'd mention him casually, Scott and Vanessa. Oh, they're fine, I think. Or, he's been kind of off lately, haven't seen him much. I'd nod, feign disinterest, and change the topic, but inside I felt nothing. Not relief, not revenge, just neutrality. That was new for me. That was growth. I did catch one photo of them by accident once. Someone had tagged me in a post that included them in the background. Scott looking away, Vanessa talking to someone else. His eyes looked tired. The charm was still there, but it was brittle now, like paint cracking under a smile. I didn't screenshot it, didn't zoom in, didn't send it to anyone. I just scrolled past. That simple motion, that tiny act of indifference felt like an entire chapter closing. There's a strange kind of peace that comes when you stop needing closure from the person who hurt you. You start realizing closure isn't something they give, it's something you claim. And I was claiming mine one quiet morning at a time. Sometimes I'd wonder if he ever thought about me, if the silence ever got to him the way it used to suffocate me. But then I'd think he probably did. Scott couldn't stand silence. He needed an audience, and I had finally stopped performing. The next time my phone buzzed with a notification, I didn't even glance at it right away. I was too busy laughing over brunch with friends, sunlight spilling across the table, my coffee cooling beside me. I didn't know it then, but that small, unbothered moment, that decision to stay present, was what real healing looked like. Not moving on overnight, not pretending nothing hurt, just learning how to live with the echoes until they faded into the background. That night before bed, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, tired, calm, alive. And I whispered almost without thinking, I forgive you, Scott, but I'll never go back. Then I turned off the light, crawled into bed, and slept without dreaming of him for the first time in months. The silence lasted longer than I expected. Months passed, and Scott's name became something that floated in conversations like dust in sunlight, visible only if I looked too closely. I didn't. I was done searching for pieces of him in places I'd already cleaned out. But ghosts have their own timing. They don't knock before entering. They just reappear. It started with a message I didn't expect, a number I didn't recognize. Hey, it's me. Been thinking about you. How are you? I stared at it for a long minute. My stomach didn't drop. My pulse didn't quicken. Nothing. Just a dull hum of recognition, like hearing a song you used to love and realizing it no longer fits the rhythm of your life. Old me would have replied. Old me would have wanted to sound strong, detached, forgiving. But the new me, she pressed delete. A week later, another message came. Longer this time. I know I messed up. I was confused. Vanessa wasn't what I thought she was. You were the only one who really cared. I miss us. I didn't reply. Not because I was cruel. Because I was done. You can't reheat a meal that was never cooked properly in the first place. The next attempt was a call. A private number. I let it ring. Once, twice, then voicemail. His voice, too soft, too careful, filled the silence of my kitchen. Look, I know I hurt you. I know I said things I didn't mean. But can we just talk? Just once. I just need to see you. I listened, then saved it. Not because I wanted him back, but because it reminded me how far the tables had turned. Weeks passed. My life kept moving. Work was busy, weekends full. I started seeing someone new, not romantically, not yet. Just a coworker, Ben, with a quiet sense of humor and the kind of eyes that actually listened when you spoke. It was easy, light, nothing like the constant tension of Scott. And maybe that's what triggered him, because right when peace started to feel natural, he broke it again. Friday night, 9:42 p.m. Another message, this one dripping with venom. Wow, so this is who you are now. You can't even give me the decency of a reply after everything I gave you. You think you're too good for me now. You'll regret this. I remember reading it while sitting on my couch, eating cold pizza, watching a movie. I didn't even feel anger, just this quiet, almost pitying laugh that slipped out. because that was Scott, the man who couldn't stand not being the center of attention. When charm failed, he reached for control. I didn't block him. I just muted the number, because indifference, I learned, was a far greater punishment than anger. That weekend, I went to brunch with my friends. Laughter, sunshine, mimosas. I felt light again. Claire mentioned almost casually, "Oh, did you hear Vanessa moved out of Scott's place?" I paused mid-sip. "Really?" "Yeah. Apparently he was using her. Borrowed money, never paid it back. Typical Scott." I didn't respond. I didn't gloat. But deep down, there was a small, bittersweet satisfaction, not in his downfall, but in the proof that life catches up to people like him eventually. You don't need revenge. The universe does the heavy lifting. Later that night, when I came home, I replayed his voicemail one last time. The shaky apology, the fake remorse, the desperate tone that sounded less like love and more like fear of being forgotten. I stood by the window, city lights glowing in the distance, and whispered to the empty room, "You don't miss me, Scott. You miss having someone to drain." Then I pressed delete. The message vanished, and with it the last string tying him to me. But the ghost wasn't done. Not yet. 2 weeks later, I was walking through a bookstore, my new favorite place of peace, when I saw him. It was almost cinematic how ordinary the moment was. He stood in the next aisle browsing self-help books of all things. He looked smaller. The confidence that once wrapped around him like armor was gone. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair unkempt. He noticed me before I noticed him, and I could see the flicker of panic cross his face. "Andrea," his voice cracked slightly. "Wow, you look amazing." I nodded politely. "Hi, Scott. How have you been?" "Good," I said simply. "Really good." He hesitated, shifting awkwardly. "I've been meaning to—" "Don't," I interrupted, not unkindly. "You said enough already." For a moment, his mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but then he saw it. Saw the calm in my face, that he couldn't shake the steadiness he once mistook for weakness. He looked down. "I'm sorry, Andrea." I nodded. I know, that was all. No anger, no speech. Just truth. He stepped aside and I walked past him, light, certain, whole. That night I wrote in my journal for the first time in months. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering, without trembling. I thought that was the end. But one last echo of him would still come before the story truly closed. And when it did, it would happen. Where it all began at another party, surrounded by the same faces, the same laughter, but this time with a different ending. Because the ghost wasn't the one who needed closure anymore. I was. I didn't plan to see him again. But life, in its dark sense of irony, always brings people full circle, not for drama, but for clarity. It was late spring when Claire messaged me, birthday dinner at Solis next Saturday. "You better come, everyone's been asking about you." I hesitated. Everyone in Claire's world often included ghosts, but something in me wanted to go, not to prove anything, not to see him, just to confirm what I already knew, that I could be in the same room as Scott and feel absolutely nothing. So I went. The restaurant was one of those rooftop places that glowed under string lights, laughter echoing between soft jazz and the clinking of glasses. I wore a cream dress, simple, understated. Not armor, not bait, just me. When I walked in, heads turned, not because I was trying to be seen, but because I wasn't hiding anymore. Claire squealed and hugged me. Finally. "You look incredible," I laughed. "You always say that when I show up on time." The night felt light, effortless, until I heard that voice, lower, slower now, like it had forgotten how to fill a room. "Andrea." I turned. There he was, Scott. But he wasn't him anymore, not the glowing, magnetic figure who used to command attention. He looked dimmed. His smile was hesitant, his posture unsure. The man who once couldn't bear silence was now swallowed by it. "Hey," I said, softly polite. "Nothing more." He blinked as if expecting warmth. "You came. Claire's birthday. Why wouldn't I?" He nodded, eyes flicking over me, searching for the version of me he used to control. But she was gone. We stood there for a moment, the noise of the party moving around us like a tide. Finally he said, "You look good. Thanks." "You always did," he added quickly, a reflex, maybe a grasp at familiarity. I smiled faintly. "And you look okay." He gave a small laugh. "Fair." I turned to leave, but he reached out. "Wait. Can we talk? Just a minute?" Something inside me wanted to refuse, not out of spite, but because I didn't owe him anything. But another part of me, the storyteller in my own head, wanted the scene to end properly. So I nodded. Outside. The rooftop air was cool, the city glittering below us. The same kind of night he once told me he loved because it made him feel important, as if the world was watching. But tonight no one was. He shoved his hands into his pockets, nervous. I've been meaning to say this for a while. I was wrong, Andrea, about everything. I said nothing. He kept going. I thought I needed excitement. I thought I wanted someone who'd challenge me, make me feel alive. But that wasn't it. I just didn't know how to be loved quietly. I studied him. The words sounded rehearsed, but the tremor in his voice didn't. He continued. Vanessa left, said I was selfish, said I didn't know how to give back. And she was right. You were right. You gave me everything, and I treated it like it was nothing. His eyes glistened. I've been thinking about you a lot, about us. And I realized something. You were the only one who ever made me feel enough. The old me would have melted at that line. The new me just breathed. Scott, I said quietly. I believe you mean that. He looked up, hope flickering. But meaning something doesn't undo what's been done. He frowned. So that's it? You can't forgive me. I did forgive you, I said. That's why I'm standing here without shaking. He stared, trying to read me, maybe searching for anger or sadness, something he could hold on to. But there was nothing left for him to grab. You once told me I didn't deserve a man like you, I said. He winced. Andrea, I held up a hand. You were right. I don't. I deserve someone kind, someone who doesn't confuse cruelty for confidence, someone who doesn't measure love by how quiet I can be. He swallowed hard. So there's really nothing left between us. There's peace, I said, and that's better. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The city buzzed below, alive and different. He finally whispered, You'll regret this one day. I smiled softly. No, Scott. I regretted you once. I don't do that anymore. And then I walked away. Inside, the lights felt warmer. Claire handed me a slice of cake, oblivious to the weight that had just lifted. Someone was telling a joke, and laughter filled the air. It was easy to join in. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a supporting character in someone else's story. I was the author now. Later that night, as I stood at the railing, city wind tugging at my hair, I thought about everything. The smirk, the silence, the ghosts, the forgiveness. It all led here, not to revenge, not to triumph, to peace. He once said I didn't deserve a man like him. He was right, but not in the way he thought. Because I deserve better, and for the first time I finally believed it. The weeks after that night felt like an exhale I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. Everything slowed down my mornings, my thoughts, even my heartbeat. It wasn't numbness, it was calm. For so long I had lived inside the noise of someone else's approval, trying to be enough, to be seen, to be chosen. Scott had been the loudest part of my life, and when he left, the silence terrified me. But now that silence was mine. I woke up early again, made coffee without rushing, sat by the window and watched sunlight creep across the walls I had painted myself. The air smelled like fresh linen and vanilla candles instead of his cologne. It was simple, ordinary, but ordinary felt like luxury after chaos. People around me noticed the difference. Claire said, You've got this glow, like you're finally comfortable in your own skin. I smiled. I am. It wasn't that I'd found someone new. It was that I'd finally stopped looking for someone to fix what I had the power to heal myself. One night, I came home from work and found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just my name in familiar handwriting. I didn't have to open it to know who it was from. Scott. I stood there for a moment, the cool paper trembling slightly between my fingers. Then I smiled, tore it in half, and threw it away. Some doors don't need slamming, they just need closing. Instead of going inside right away, I walked to the park down the street. It was quiet, the kind of night that makes you think the world is whispering instead of shouting. Kids' laughter echoed faintly from a distance, the air carried the scent of jasmine, and somewhere someone was playing a soft guitar. I sat on a bench, watching the streetlights blink on one by one. My phone buzzed with a message from Ben Still. Up for coffee tomorrow, I smiled and replied, Definitely. Not because I was ready for love again, but because I wasn't scared of it anymore. The next morning over coffee, Ben talked about his failed marriage, how it taught him that love isn't a rescue mission. I listened quietly, and for once I didn't feel the need to compare or confess. I just let the conversation flow. Halfway through, he said something I'll never forget. Sometimes we confuse love with endurance, but love isn't about how much pain you can survive. It's about how safe you feel when you stop surviving. It struck me not because it was poetic, but because it was true. I had spent years surviving Scott calling it love. Now I was learning what peace felt like when it wasn't conditional. Weeks turned into a rhythm. Work, coffee, laughter, small adventures. Ben never tried to fill the silence. He shared it with me easily, and I realized that was what I'd been missing all along, someone who didn't need to be impressed, just understood. But the real freedom wasn't about him, it was about me. I stopped apologizing for being too quiet, too emotional, too cautious. I stopped asking for permission to rest, to take space, to be alone. I stopped needing to prove that I was strong, because peace, I learned, is the quietest kind of strength. One Sunday, while cleaning out my closet, I found Scott's old hoodie, the one I'd forgotten I even had. I held it for a moment, half expecting the old ache to return. It didn't. It was just fabric, now faded and meaningless. I folded it neatly, placed it in a donation box, and whispered to the empty room, "Someone else can keep you warm now." As I closed the box, I felt that invisible weight finally sliding off for good. That evening I went for a drive. The city lights blurred through the windshield wind, tangling my hair. My favorite song humming from the speakers. I didn't have a destination, just motion, just freedom. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes, bright lips curved in a small, knowing smile. That's when it hit me. I didn't need a grand ending, a dramatic speech, or a perfect revenge. My closure was this peace that didn't depend on anyone else's apology. I rolled the window down, let the air rush in, and whispered half to myself, half to the past. "You were a lesson, Scott, not the ending." And for the first time in years, the words didn't hurt. They felt honest. They felt final. Back home, I lit a candle and opened my journal, the same one I used to fill with pain. Now, I wrote something different. The quiet isn't lonely anymore. It's mine. And maybe that's what healing really means, not forgetting the story, but learning how to tell it without breaking. I closed the notebook, turned off the lights, and stood by the window again. The city below shimmered alive, endless forgiving. I wasn't just free of him, I was free of needing anyone to validate that freedom. And for once, that was enough.